Not only will I go buy him, I'm going to show him how to drive. So coming out of karting, everyone thinks they're God in a go-kart. There's no suspension, everything's lovely. It's a little different at a touring car. So at the age of 17, I think it was 2000, and if I do the math, 7, I was still in grade 12, senior year, I think you guys refer to it down here. I was finally going to the racetrack, which is something that my brother did as well, and my brother was a phenomenal driver and very, very consistent, whereas I was very raw speed. And you know, I'll say it, I'm ADD and I am the middle child, and I fit all of those bills perfectly. So I was impulsive. I used to get black flags in karting, and I was lightning quick for one lap and then a complete absolute danger to society the next. Not to that extent, but you know, I was a little bit of a wild hothead sometimes that you'd have to watch. It made things exciting. I certainly made go-karting exciting at our small little track. Moving into cars was an interesting thing. Dad had the Hyundai dealership at the time, and the Motorola Cup Series had originally 3 Hyundais that raced, that were a promotional project. They were going to rent out space at the Molson Indy one year to present their new Elantra, and they said, well, why would we spend so much money to do that? We could just put one on the racetrack. The Key Motorsports started building the cars in Ontario, and they raced the Motorola Cup for quite a few years. And Dad managed, when they decided to upgrade to the newer Tiburon, being a Hyundai dealer, to get a good deal and convince them that as a Hyundai dealer, he should keep them in the family and should have these race cars. And Dad had raced Volkswagen GTIs for years and years and years up to that point. So we were switching to the Hyundais. He started with the Elantra, which in his recollection is although not crazy fast, was the best race car he'd ever driven in terms of balance, just the way that it was built. He used to describe it as a big comfy couch. And in the rain, he would dominate everyone. It was insane. It would take down everything. But now we were getting to the Tiburons, and the Tiburons were around just as I was getting into the racing world. And everybody knew that Will was okay, but Matt was going to be another story. And I remember in the driving school, Dad very quickly assigned me with, you know, I call him our non-blood uncle, but Derek, who's another dealer, and he's raced all over North America. He's won at Road Atlanta, he's won at Mosport in Canada, he's won everywhere. He's pretty much gone. Virginia International Raceway, etc. He's won SCCA championships, and he's well decorated for an amateur driver, if you call him that. And Dad very purposely assigned me to him as my instructor. And Derek's sole purpose of instructing me was not so much to teach me how to drive. He taught me a bit about weight transfer with the suspension, but to teach me how to keep my head in check. Because they all knew that as soon as I was released on my own into the wild, young Matthew with a race car, that all hell could break loose. And through the driver school all day, I was fine, I was good. We worked on it, and it is very different. This is I guess, more to the point of the transition from karting to cars. And a go-kart, an input is this. And it's usually you're throwing the front end, getting it a little loose, getting it into a yaw, and then just kind of controlling it through the corner and right foot steering. In a touring car, weight transfer, this is an input. And the first thing they teach you is lift and die. If you get sideways in a front wheel drive, the correct thing to do is not to lift off, which is the instinct. Everyone thinks, especially the amateur driver, lift off, oh no, more speed is bad. Well, actually in front wheel drive, it'll pull you straight. So you want to turn to correct and plant your foot in it, and if all goes well, it'll pull you straight. Which you see all the time in British touring car and stuff with, Matt Neal coming over Brands Hatch, and same thing, he straightens it out, and it's true, it works. And I knew this, I'd heard all kinds of racing stories, and I've been around the track enough. But sure enough, as soon as I got released into the Tiburon, I was out there trying to break lap records within my 3rd lap in a full race car. I remember chasing a WRX STI, and I also remember suddenly that Derek and Dad were both on the pit wall the second time I went by, looking at me as if to be like, we're watching, we know what you're doing right now. And they said that they would black flag me if I got up to speed. Well, the 3rd lap by, I was certainly up to speed, or at least the speed beyond my capabilities. Race pace wasn't quite there yet, but beyond what I was capable of in a full race car at that point in time. And keep in mind, in karting, I had been quite successful locally and was all headstrong about that. And I'm chasing down a WRX STI that has absolutely everything on my car. And I remember getting to the back straight, and it was because it was still part of the driver's school, it was point to pass. He pointed me by, and I thought, well, not only will I go by him, I'm going to show him how to drive. So I went down to corner 7, and this is Atlantic Motorsport Park, is a small, bumpy, narrow track that was paved in the 70s. Gilles Villeneuve still has the lap record from his Formula Atlantic days. Bobby Rahaal's been there, Kiki Rosberg's been there. And even then it was as narrow as an alley. And when they built it, they didn't actually lay cement before the asphalt. So every year you have to relearn the bumps. Every year you've got to relearn the track. Of course, this is my first time learning it in a race car. I've been there a lot as a kid. And turn 7, although it doesn't sound fast, and it's not a high-speed track, it's momentum, is a turn-in of about probably in the tip around 100 kilometers an hour, which doesn't sound much, but again, it's very narrow, very bumpy, and it's off-camber, uphill, and it switches back, and you go kind of right, blind apex, left. And I remember getting to the sort of the rise in 7 and just kind of feeling the back of the car hop a bit. And I didn't know anything about setup. It turns out we had the air suspension, which it ran, an air stiff suspension that we had it kind of set wrong, but I would have never known that. And I hesitated even just for a second, and that was too much. And I went, oh, I'll correct it. But again, not a go-kart. And I did keep my foot in it, and by the time I realized I actually did get it going straight, and any other track in the world, it would have just gone off and maybe hit a tire barrier or sunk in a sand trap. A&P just happened to have a random ditch beside this particular point on the corner where the hill running down into 7 met the grade of where corner 8 came in, and no one had really known about it. It was apparently someone had gone off there years prior, but it's not a common spot to go off. And it hooked the front of the car and snapped a full forged wheel straight off the spokes. Like, we had a Ninja Star left when we unbolted it. The rim was just a complete donut with the tire. All I remember is seeing blue, green, blue, green. And even I was surprised, because I at this point I committed to, like, I'm going off, that's where I'm gonna end up. And all of a sudden, I was upside down, I was all over the place. Out the windshield is grass, and the horizon's up here, not here. And I'm thinking, oh shit. Like, this is, like, what that just happened? Like, you're almost in shock. But me being me, first thing I just punched the steering wheel, because I was mad at myself. And I remember the car behind me, not the STI, the second car behind me, had an instructor still in it, because this particular driver wanted some more instruction before he got loose on his own. And he ran over to the windshield, and I couldn't figure out what he was, like, a midget. He was like 3 feet tall, and I said, like, looking down at him. And he goes, you all right? And the first thing I said was, Dad's gonna kill me. It's the first instinct in my mind. Not car, not me, okay. It was like, Dad's going to kill me. He said, don't worry about your dad, don't worry about your dad. And his name's Todd Roberts, and he was one of my instructors for the day as well. And he's a great guy. And he knows my dad well, and my dad's a bit of an interesting person, eccentric personality as well. He said, don't worry about your dad. But he said, when you get out of the car, jump. I said, why do I jump? He said, just trust me, jump. And I jumped out, and I looked back, and the car had landed on a tire wall and was balancing and just sort of rocking. And the car actually moved when I jumped, and he was worried that when I moved, it would just fall on top of me. So I jumped out. Apparently, when I was upside down, I was 10 feet, full vertical, upside down, roof matching the tarmac below me. It sent me, like, it was huge. And I held up pretty well for a 17-year-old. And everyone around me was checking on me more than the car, as you should do. The car's the car, it can be replaced, I can't. And then Dad came over. And Dad was told in the pits, he just had a big one, calm down, because people knew how we work. We're the kind of family that we're good with tools, but our best tool is profanity. So he came over, but he was actually pretty sentimental. I think someone gave him a little slap. Well, actually, I know from afterwards that someone did give him a little slap. He came over and he looked at me, and I broke down. I held up so well with everyone else, and I looked at him, and I just started sobbing my eyes out. I closed my tinted visor on my helmet, and I just went into almost the fetal position in his arms, and I just lost it. And I think at that moment he realized he couldn't yell at me. So that I didn't get the yelling for a few more days, and I got a lot of jokes for months. And despite all the damage to the car, the number one hurt thing was probably my pride. I remember going back because I was still in high school, and everyone was asking, how's racing? I just didn't answer, didn't talk. And unfortunately, the worst part of this was the year before my brother had rolled the sister car, which was actually in no fault of his own. He got tapped off of a corner, and being a low budget team, and Dad had just built a new house, we just decided that the racing budget's not there anymore, guys. You know, we're not going to F1. That was never going to happen anyway. Sorry, we'll stick to some autocross. And I had to live with the guilt of potentially killing the racing family that we were and taking us out of it, which we're now addressing and getting back into. But it was a tough one. It was certainly a learning period, and I've learned that a lot of karters have issues with, especially going into touring cars rather than formula cars, because the weight transfer is so significant that you really have to learn the balancing of it. And I certainly got caught out. If it was a go-kart, if it was a formula car, I'm confident I could have saved it. But with that car and the amount of weight, it was the tail that wagged the dog. It just, center of gravity rolled, car rolled, and I didn't have it.